Welcome back to Blood 2 The Chosen. Yeah, we're here again. That means it's story time again, though this time I'm going to be going even more bare bones. There's quite a lot to talk about regarding this game, and I'm going to save some of it for later. The sequel to Blood was teased as early as the trailer for the original game, which promised a second one in time for Halloween of 1998. As is typical in publisher-developer relations, this was almost entirely at odds with what Monolith themselves were interested in. While Jason Hall did tease at the possibility of a second game in a text file for the original game, for the rest of 1997 those that weren't working on the two-dimensional side-scrolling platformer Claw were beginning work on what would become the Lithtech engine in its first game, Shogo. Nick Newhard, the lead designer for the first game, was approached again for the sequel but ultimately passed the opportunity over before leaving Monolith entirely, leaving level designer James Wilson III to take over, his own role being filled by Bill Vandervoort. Craig Hubbard also played a role in the game's design, but that was a secondary effort for him, his primary focus being on Shogo, so the role of secondary level designers was split between newcomers Ben Coleman and David Kelvin. The programmers Peter Fries and Daniel Leaks had also left the company by then, so the team hired on Scott Schlegel and Greg Kettle. Other newcomers included Mike Dussault, who with assistance from Brad Pendleton was the principal creator of Lithtech, and Nathan Hendrickson, joining as a writer while also assisting in level design and scripted sequences. The game's development went public on April 23, 1998, with the team releasing weekly updates similarly to what they did for the first game. Unlike the first game's updates, these were more general, often featuring a single member of the team giving insight on some aspect of the game's development. Most of the images of the developers I've used so far, for instance, come from the first such update on the 23rd, where James Wilson took a tour through the company's offices, showing pictures and short biographies of several of the people involved, including the people already mentioned, alongside others like public relations manager Paul Butterfield, concept artist Eric Kohler, and special effects engineer Andy Mattingly. Other updates varied wildly both in focus and in relevance. The fourth update, on May 14th, was simply a list of picks for who to star in a hypothetical Blood movie, while the next update on the 21st had Mattingly describing his work on the game's interface, in particular showing off a fancier concept for the main menu and discussing an in-game spellbook that probably would have worked similarly to the growth and usage of force powers in September 97's Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. Other updates included Vandervoort describing how to animate a moving car in the engine, Kohler describing the process of making concept art and character profile images, Daniel Bernstein discussing the process of composing the music in the game's adaptive music capabilities, and Wilson showing off the progress made on the meatpacking plant that ultimately became Chapter 2's fourth level. Similarly to that update were also weekly visions, which consisted more of simply showing off screenshots of the in-development game, giving a good idea of what it looked like earlier in development, particularly different models for weapons, a different heads-up display, and according to this image, the CAS Revenant being even worse than it already is. With 2 games in development now, the intention was that the team working on Shogo would merge back in with the team for Blood 2 once the former game released. While some cooperation and sharing of assets was possible due to using the same engine, thus this game's credits including a mention of Team Shogo, complications arose that prevented this from fully taking place, which ultimately contributed to this game's rushed nature. Moreover, the game was now facing much fiercer competition, GT itself publishing Unreal in May of 1998, and the original promised release date of Halloween coinciding with several high-profile releases such as Ritual Entertainment's Sin, Looking Glass Studios' Thief: The Dark Project, and perhaps most importantly, Valve Software's Half-Life. Ultimately, one of the worst mistakes GT made in regards to this game's development was not abandoning the circa Halloween launch date. The game needed at least another few weeks of polish, but GT was dealing with a rather bad financial situation, even despite having published Unreal 6 months prior, and pushed the game out as soon as possible to attempt to secure more funding. This meant that a lot of features and story ideas were hastily cut, as can be seen by taking a peek in the manual. Mentions of knives becoming more powerful with use, the M16 being able to be used 2 at a time, something about a constitution binding that would let life seeds boost your health above 250 points, the time bomb having different timer settings, and the flashlight and night vision goggles having unlimited battery power. Even the story on the official website, long after the game's release, continued to claim that the story started with Caleb bringing back the other 3 Chosen, which would have been the starting point for a game in which you could play as any of the 4 you wished, with cutscenes and everything, or a full cooperative game with up to 3 other players, each of them taking one of the 4 Chosen. Between that and GT Interactive being bought out by Infogrames shortly after release meant as well that Monolith didn't see enough funding to patch the game to the state they wanted, which leaves us with the game I'm showing to you now. Unpolished, buggy, prone to crashing, badly balanced, with a plot that makes little sense and a manual that outright lies to you. You may have noticed the video isn't over now that I've said my piece. That's because this time through the subway train does something differently. Rather than crashing a train into another train, we climb on top of the train and hop onto one just ahead of it. From there, it's a simple matter of clearing another 2 train cars to get to the front of this train, where we take control of it and bring it to a proper halt. No crashing or anything. Amazing, I know. The only noteworthy thing here is that these fanatics seem to suddenly be dealing less damage to me. Well, that's a high note to end this one on. Next time we're back at Horlock Station to take another train to the end of the chapter. I'll see you then.